What's up, Walking Dead fans? Welcome to Chronocord Media and our recap of the huge Season 6 premiere of The Walking Dead, Episode 1, First Time Again. I am C-Dub, joined by my co-host, JC. Folks, just before we go along here, if you have not already, please subscribe. We do weekly Walking Dead and Fear the Walking Dead coverage. And here it is, folks, your fair warning. Spoilers are going to happen from here on out. So here's your 3, 2, 1. All right, everybody who's left now has seen First Time Again. JC, man, what an awesome opening to this episode.
You know, my first thought going into this was, what kind of scene would we see first? Is it going to be a flashback, flash forward, or a current event? And lo and behold, the entire episode was a series of flashbacks to previous events and what was going on currently in the storyline. So many things took place in this episode, C-Dub. There's going to be a lot to cover. Let's jump right in.
Yes, most definitely. Starting off, we see the group at a quarry, which immediately, JC, I was like, whoa, wait a minute. The quarry's back in Georgia. What the hell? But clearly this is another quarry near Alexandria. The scene starts off with Rick and the Alexandrians pretty much preparing themselves for the incoming walkers. We see a complete mass of dead humanity with what must be tens of thousands of the dead pretty much just hanging out in a quarry. They were shoulder to shoulder, as thick as thieves, man. I mean, there was no way that if those guys got out, that anybody would be able to survive. And as Rick and the Alexandrians are starting to prepare themselves, we see the Alexandrian Carter telling Rick that the Alexandrians aren't ready. And despite Rick arguing with Carter that we got to do this right now, we got to do it live, the Alexandrians flee from the quarry. A truck in one of the entranceways going up out of the quarry collapses, and the walkers start getting out. Of course, heading right toward Alexandria, not what we want. So Rick has the truck near their location opened up to lure the walkers out the other way. This is a pretty tricky situation with all these dead here in this quarry, but I think Rick has the right idea going.
There had to be damn near 10,000 walkers in that quarry, and that truck falling off the side of the cliff set in motion the rest of the events in this episode, and the flashbacks begin right after that. We see Deanna laying over Reg's pool of blood, and she tells Father Gabriel that he was wrong. And you can kind of tell right away this is a flashback because they're doing black and white footage for the flashbacks, and the current scenes are in color. So now Abraham's carrying off the bodies, and Glenn brings back Nick to the hospital as Tara's waking up. Surprisingly, Glenn covers up for Nick, C-Dub. That was shocking, and that pretty much allowed Nick to continue living in Alexandria.
That was a really bold thing for Glenn to do there, JC. He could have very easily just killed him there in the woods, but apparently Glenn still is holding on to that every life matters. And every life is precious. There's no reason to kill somebody, despite how crazy he might be. I don't like Nick, though. I think this guy's a little bit of a rat.
And there's a quick shot of Carl and the girl that he met who lives in Alexandria, the one that always sneaks off. And they're on a rooftop hanging out, and you see Jesse's oldest son. You're kind of worrying that he might be jealous and that something might happen later in the episodes of this season.
Kind of creepy there, Ron.
Those black and white flashbacks, they kind of help us catch up to what went on in the gap between the end of season 5 and the start of season 6. We see roadways that are barricaded off, and Rick is giving directions about a plan that seems like it's meant to lead the horde of zombies out of the quarry and far away from Alexandria.
In a flashback at this point, JC, we see Rick and Daryl start talking about how to fortify Alexandria with more watch points and kind of debating between one another whether it's a good decision to go out and look for new survivors to welcome into Alexandria or not. Rick seems to have the stance that it's not a good idea. Daryl, however, is fairly insistent in his opinion that they should go out and bring more people there. I have a feeling that we're going to see a little bit more conflict between these two philosophies as season 6 goes on. We then, JC, see Rick and Morgan discussing the events that have happened whenever we saw Pete get slaughtered by Rick there after killing Reg. As Rick and Morgan are kind of catching up and sharing philosophies, Rick hears the sound of digging in the distance and comes upon Father Gabriel and another Alexandrian burying the corpses of Pete and Reg in the community graveyard. Rick seems to be a bit flabbergasted and asking, why are there two graves? And they tell him that there's two corpses. And Rick pretty much says, we don't bury killers in here. And Deanna shows up, who is the de facto leader for the Alexandrians, and tells them to take Pete's corpse outside the safe zone. It seems like this is pretty justified on Deanna's part, but I think it may be a little bit hypocritical for Rick to say that they don't bury killers there. I mean, Rick's killed a few people himself.
But C-Dub, once again, Creeper Ron, the teenager, he's lurking in the bushes again, and he overhears this. And you just have that sense that he's going to lead to trouble in the future of season 6. Rick and Morgan are dumping Pete's body in the trunk of a car, and Rick is trying to justify why he had to kill Pete to Morgan. And to my surprise, Morgan kind of understands. And he says, we're both killers. You know, C-Dub, so far in this episode, I'm not really sensing the tension that was built up in the trailers, the commercials for season 6 between Rick and Morgan.
Seems to be that's a bit of a red herring there for the trailer. Might be the red herring for the trailer. But that's not to say that we won't see a conflict somewhere down the road between these two philosophies. Morgan with the live and let live approach, and Rick with the survive by any means approach.
Something else about this episode was there seemed to be a lot more lighthearted moments, I guess. Like, they're not quite funny, but they were meant to not be so serious in the context of what's going on this show, especially the part where Rick, Morgan, and Michonne were at the orange checkpoint, and Morgan accuses Michonne of stealing a peanut butter bar, which she did, and she denies it, and Morgan kind of looks pissed off about it. So Morgan and Rick are taking Pete's body like 20 miles away to bury it, and as they're going to do so, Ron, the teenage son, is following their car. When they're burying Pete, or starting to, Rick hears a noise, and it just sounds like lots and lots of walkers and their snarls. And as they approach the edge of a cliff, they discover what we saw in the beginning of the episode with those thousands and thousands of walkers all trapped there with the semi-trailers. And luckily, Rick is there to save Ron as he is being chased by some of the biters.
Yeah, JC, it seems that Ron happened upon Rick and Morgan, of course, as they were going to bury Pete, his father. We saw a little bit of another conflict there between Rick and Morgan. Rick just wanted to leave him there, didn't give a shit about burying him. Morgan, however, did not. He wanted to bury him. Again, another difference in philosophy from two of probably the strongest characters on the show in Rick and Morgan. But as you said, Ron, I don't know what the heck you're doing out there, dude, but going out and trying to find out where your father is buried, probably not worth risking your life for. Thankfully, as you said, Rick and Morgan were there to prevent his death. Rick pretty much just throws a zombie right over the cliff as he tackles Ron and gets him out of the way. That would have been a long fall with a quick stop for Ron.
They actually end up burying Pete as his son is watching. And then we get a flash forward to the current when Glenn, Nick, and a new character named Heath. They're at a building, it's kind of isolated, and they're trying to figure out how to take out the walkers inside of it. And Nick and Glenn, they're, before they were enemies, and now they're kind of on the same team. Nick has submitted to Glenn's wisdom, if you will. And as Glenn says, another kind of funny one-liner, I'm supposed to be delivering pizzas, man, when Heath is kind of questioning why they're going to open the gates and take him on. But we see Rick meeting with the townsfolk about his plan. Deanna is fully behind him. But meanwhile, Nick Papa Giorgio, a.k.a. Carter, is not too keen on Rick's idea. And you can just tell the chemistry between them is not very good.
Yeah, JC, it seems like Carter really has a dissenting opinion. In fact, we'll find out a little bit more of just what he thinks about Rick. Man, Nick Papa Giorgio, butt out, dude. You're not a survivor. We do hear Glenn, as they're discussing this plan, quietly telling Maggie that it's a good idea for her to stay back with Deanna. It seems like Glenn kind of saw that Deanna wasn't necessarily holding up so well in the fallout of her husband's death. Probably a good idea for Glenn to suggest this. Back to current time in color, we see Rick, Michonne, and Morgan shooting flares to attract the herd of walkers that are being led to the fork in the road by Daryl, Abraham, and Sasha. Daryl, of course, on his motorcycle, Abraham and Sasha in a car. I thought really this plan with the flares is just genius. We found out in an earlier season that the zombies will follow the flares if you shoot them, and they're pretty easy to kind of make your puppet as far as which way they go. Rick, I gotta say, man, this is genius.
So here we are in the black and white footage again, another flashback, and we see Rick going over his plans again to Carter specifically because he was the big doubter. And Eugene steps up using his infinite mullet wisdom, and he proposes a plan to use the metal panels that were used to build the wall for Alexandria. Use those to build the barricades in the road. Great call, Eugene. And then we get a flashback to them building the barricades after more current footage of them rerouting the herd and everything. And Daryl tells Rick again he thinks that they should continue to search for new members. And then Rick tells Carol that she should stay back and kind of gauge the feeling of the Alexandrians and see what their mindset is after the whole Pete fiasco.
I think that was a wise decision on Rick's part to tell Carol that she should stay back and kind of be his eyes and ears to how the Alexandrians react in the fallout. Again, we flash forward to the current time. We see Glenn and Heath at the tractor store with all the walkers trapped inside. They're still about to execute the plan to take them out. At this point, Glenn tells Nick that he is not going to be an active participant thinning out this herd of zombies inside the tractor store, and tells Nick to stay back. Again, another flashback to Maggie telling Tara about what happened with Glenn and Nick in the woods, and how Glenn spared Nick's life whenever he possibly shouldn't have, and pretty much confides in Tara and says, "What should I do?" Tara then pretty much deflects it right back to Maggie and says, "I trust your judgment." I think this was probably a good idea at the time to keep the peace. It seems to be the best thing for the survival of everyone.
Yeah, it was really nonstop action in the season premiere. Way, way more than the entire season of Fear the Walking Dead. I will say that, though it was great. But just the action in this episode 1 was unmatched, I believe, in any other season premiere for The Walking Dead. Glenn and Heath break the window and let the zombies start to pour out. They're taking them on, kind of getting overwhelmed. And then Nick steps in with the trusty knife to help out. And in the process, kind of shows his worth and his apologies, if you will, through actions to Glenn.
It seems like Nick possibly is starting to come back around and realize that he's going to have to go with the flow or get eaten.
So another clue in Abraham completely losing his shit is, besides the booze, he gets out of the car to divert some zombies, and he's laughing about it, and he's just kind of getting giggly, and the way he's talking about the way Pete and Reg were both killed, it's definitely lacking in empathy.
Yeah, JC, I think the comment about possibly having some of Pete's brains lodged in his ear is a pretty good indication that Abraham is a couple of fries short of a Happy Meal. I don't know if it's the booze or if it's just the way of the world getting to Abraham, but seems like he's starting to wear a little bit thin. We then see a flashback to Rick offering his condolences to Deanna for the loss of her husband, Reg. And he tells her that the people of Alexandria need to be armed inside the walls. No matter what, they're going to have to be able to defend themselves. The walkers at this point then ambush from a flanking position Carter and the rest of the untested Alexandrians. It seems at this point that Rick is just going to kind of sit back and wait to see what happens if they can defend themselves. It's at this point that we see the Alexandrians have no chance. They're pretty much just like kicking them, trying to keep them away. They're very, very gun shy. As we know, that will not ensure your survival. So at this point, Morgan and Michonne and Rick step in and pretty well take care of the few zombies that were seemingly a massive threat to these untested Alexandrians. Although I will say it seems like it kind of pissed off Morgan because as he said to Rick, I thought you don't take chances anymore. That was a pretty big chance, but I mean, Rick's kind of right. These people have to either step it up or they're just going to be zombie fodder.
Yeah, I think that was Rick's way of testing Carter and showing him that this is what it's like outside of the walls. And if you want to survive, you better figure out how to kill a zombie real quick. Another flashback here, C-Dub. We see Eugene gathering some food from the pantry, and he overhears Carter plotting with some other townspeople to basically just kill Rick. And Carter thinks he's a threat, and they all have weapons because they are in the armory. So, of course, Eugene breaks a jar of whatever, jelly or something, and he gets caught by Carter, and he's at gunpoint, and Carter looks like he's going to kill him. Luckily, Rick is there with some help, and Rick confronts Carter and right away puts him in his place. You think Rick's going to kill Carter now, but luckily he thinks otherwise, and Morgan is kind of impressed at that.
Yeah, JC, this was a major turning point, I thought, in the relations between Rick and the rest of the Alexandrians. Carter pretty much owns up to the fact that it was his idea. The rest of the Alexandrians seem to be a little bit hesitant with executing the plan of killing Rick in some sort of attempt to gain control of their town. Not a good idea. Rick Grimes is going to be able to stay cool, calm, and collected, as we saw while Eugene was at gunpoint. He made Carter look like a little bitch, completely took away all his manhood, and then said, you know what? I'm going to let you live.
So back to the current times, the zombie horde is still on the move. Carter and Rick kind of come to terms and shake hands while they are planning how to lead the herd down the road. And Carter decides to take it upon himself to get to the front. And lo and behold, right away, he gets grabbed by a zombie stuck in a tree and a quick bite right to the cheek. And he gone. Carter is no more and pretty much is getting what he deserves. And a timely flashback pops up with Rick and Morgan on the porch. Morgan is holding little Judith there, and Rick is talking about wanting to kill Carter because he's stupid and he just wants to prevent him from messing things up.
Yeah, Rick's got a great point there with Carter being a liability to everybody else. I mean, if you're stupid and you lead zombies toward you and the rest of the group, then, I mean, you're not very valuable. And I think Rick had a point, he just doesn't get it. Carter is pretty much doomed. Carter has been bit, and Carter will not shut up. He's screaming like a little girl, and Rick's like, come on, man, be quiet, you gotta be quiet, and boom. Immediately, Rick takes out his dagger, stabs Carter right in the base of his brain. As Morgan happens upon the scene, he's definitely a little bit troubled by what he just saw. Rick kind of petitions to him and says this had to happen. And Morgan said, I know, that's how it is now. So it seems that in some ways, there's been a compromise between the two philosophies of Rick and Morgan. But I think that Rick and Morgan have finally reached that compromise, so it seems, at least for now. We then flash back to Rick and Jessie, Pete's wife, now widow, and the mother of Ron, the little creeper, creeping around and following everyone. She seems to be a little bit bothered with how Rick dealt with the situation with Ron and kind of takes charge and says, Rick, this is my job. You can't be putting your hands on my son. You definitely can't talk to him that way. I don't think Rick was out of line doing so. I mean, I think he has good intentions. But we then see Jessie reveal that she's been taking up arms training from Rosita. Rosita is a hell of a shot. I think that's probably a good idea on her part. I think Jessie has finally realized that it's going to be up to her to care for her sons and those that she loves, and more importantly, herself.
The flashback continues. We see Rick showing the last step of the plan, and Abraham is asking Sasha, are you doing this because you want to die? And you can kind of tell they have a very interesting chemistry between those two characters. Then we flash forward to the current where they are leading the herd with Daryl. And another flashback. This is a lot of flash forward, a lot of flashback, C-Dub. Rick is at the store where we saw Glenn and Heath and Nick, and he's basically saying that they need to come back and clear that store out just so that there is no stragglers and no hitches in the plan. Here, Glenn is essentially telling Nick to make it right, and he'll gain more trust from everyone and be more reliable, especially in missions outside of the walls. And it's at this point, C-Dub, in which the flashbacks and the current scenes come together. Very well done by Greg Nicotero, the director and special effects wizard on The Walking Dead. And all of these flashbacks and flash forwards and all this stuff, C-Dub, it leads right to the big cliffhanger for episode 2.
Yeah, JC, all of a sudden we hear this terrible, terrible grating noise. It's a horn. What the hell is somebody setting off a air raid siren for, it sounded like. It is at this point that Rick and Michonne pretty much realize that it's coming from Alexandria, or at least the general direction. Who in the hell could possibly be doing this? The first thought in my mind, JC, was maybe it's the wolves, but I'm not sure. It could be actually coming from within Alexandria. I don't believe we ever established if the Alexandrians had set up like an air raid siren like that. At first, I thought it might have been Sasha laying on the car horn. Like, what the heck is going on here? Is she trying to sabotage the plan? But it's clearly a very, very loud horn. We're going to have to wait until episode 2 to find out exactly where it's coming from. The episode ends with that awesome overhead shot panning out of the entire herd of zombies now turning straight toward Alexandria. Oh boy, this is going to get very interesting. It's time for the Alexandrians to be put to the test.
It kind of sounded like a horn from a giant semi-trailer truck like we saw in the rock quarry. My other thought, besides the wolves being the culprits for that horn, it might be Ron, the teenager. He obviously hates Rick for killing his dad. And what better way to piss Rick off than to completely ruin his plan to, of course, save Alexandria. Cannot wait to find out what happens on episode 2 next week.
This was a really, really good extra large kickoff for season 6. Tons of action. I mean, I would almost say that this is the most action-packed episode of The Walking Dead to date. On next week, it seems like the zombie herd has made it to Alexandria, and we don't really know as far as what's going on with Sasha and Abraham as well as Daryl, but I do believe I caught quickly a shot of Enid, Carl's little girlfriend, being trapped inside of a car, and it seems that she's going to find herself in a possibly risky situation. I think she may have to learn her lesson from sneaking off from the safety of Alexandria, and perhaps that could be a telltale sign that maybe the rest of the group has to leave Alexandria as well, or it could just be Enid sneaking off and being an idiot.
All right, that wraps up our coverage of the season 6 premiere episode of The Walking Dead, titled First Time Again. Thanks for tuning in to Chronocord Media. We will be here all season long, every week, providing our insight, analysis, and other opinions on the show and the Walking Dead universe. Make sure to subscribe to us. Make sure to leave some comments below this video. Let us know what you thought of the episode. We thought it was spectacular. We cannot wait until episode 2, JSS. For C-Dub, I'm JC. Don't get bit.